Ano ay Miki Aloha in the Makamaka, and welcome to A Second Glance, where we take an in-depth look at issues in and around Hawaii and the rest of the world. The 4th of July is either coming up or has already passed, depending on when this particular program plays. But it is around that period of time that I wish to address your attention. Oftentimes we hear terms such as loyalty, patriotism, and Pono. And what are the deeper meanings of these terms? I think the 4th of July gives us an opportunity to examine that deeper meaning and to apply the history of Hawaii to these concepts. The question of loyalty. What exactly is loyalty? Is loyalty nothing more than familiarity, than having become associated with a group of people or with a particular geographic area or with a church or with friends, and therefore one develops a sense of loyalty to such friends? And if that is the case, then isn't loyalty as merely familiarity somewhat cheap? Or is loyalty something deeper than just friendship? Is loyalty something more than just one's past relationship and as a result having developed a particular alliance? Let's take a larger look at the question of patriotism. What is the meaning of patriotism? One is patriotic to one's nation. So it is an expansion of the concept of loyalty rather than being merely a particular alliance to an individual or to a group. Now, when we talk about patriotism, we are talking about the loyalty to a larger nation. But if that nation is acting in a very poor way, or in a very inappropriate way, or in a way that is not appropriate, is it patriotism to remain in abidance with or in conformity with the national call? Or is that foolishness? What about the concept of Pono? Pono, rather than being merely a question of personal relationships, Pono deals with more a question of righteousness, a question of what is correct, what is appropriate. So when one says that I am loyal to or I am patriotic to, and let's take for example the nation, let's say the American nation, is it appropriate to be patriotic merely to a nation and follow whatever its president or its Congress or the superior officer, if you are in, let's say, military service, to just follow in lockstep as an expression of one's loyalty? Or is one's loyalty or patriotism to be more attached to the principles that the nation is supposed to stand for? And when the nation itself does not abide by its principles, one's deeper loyalty, one's deeper patriotism rests with the principles that the nation is supposed to stand for. Let's step aside from that issue and ask ourselves, what should a nation stand for? Is it merely for the self-preservation of the people? Is it merely for the continuation of empowerment of a particular government at a particular time? Is it for the possession of territories? Is that what is in the national interest of a nation? Or should it be for the principles that the nation claims that it stands for? Which brings us now to the question of the 4th of July and why celebrate. Is it the celebration of the breaking away of a group of colonies, 13, from a mother country, England? Or is it for the establishment of a principle under which the colony breaks away? And if so, what was that principle? The principle was essentially this, that when a time comes that the government no longer derives its just powers through the consent of the governed, but by force of arms or by mere proclamation by a group of men, normally they were men, who have asserted their power over our people, then the government has lost its legitimacy. Not only has the government lost its legitimacy, but the principle that comes out of the Declaration of Independence penned by Thomas Jefferson is something more than that. It says that government cannot begin its rightful governance unless through the consent of the governed. A very important American principle. But it didn't start with Tom Jefferson, because what he did was he collected ideas from, of course, Ben Franklin, who was regarded as the intellect behind the intellect of Tom Jefferson. But they also read from John Locke and others who had written about this philosophical principle that governance must be through the consent of the governed. And you find in the American history that it's repeated not only at the time of the Declaration of Independence, but in the formation of the Constitution of the United States, as well as in that great divide within the United States called the War Between States, or as others see it, the Civil War. Okay. Under the principle, if one sees it as a matter of the Civil War, whether or not men who have not consented to be enslaved by others should have the right to liberation and be given the authority or the permission to consent before one can have governance or take away someone's liberties. Very fundamental principles. So when you move back to the question of patriotism and the question of loyalty, what is one's loyalty or patriotism to? Is it merely to a government or a people or a country, or is it to the principles by which the country claims that it stands for? That is all relevant because in Hawaii, as we look at the celebration of the 4th of July, we ask ourselves, how does those principles of the right of the governed to first give their consent to be governed, otherwise there is no justification or legitimacy in the governance of that people, how does it play? How does it apply to us here in Hawaii? And it comes right back to that underlying question of this claim that is sounded in the land, sounded in the people, especially the indigenous people, but not limited only to the indigenous Hawaiians here in Hawaii. And that is a claim of self-determination. That is a claim of liberation. That is a claim of Hawaiian sovereignty. What is the basis in history of this claim? It is a basis as follows. On the 4th of July, 1894, there were a group of men who gathered together using the Bible in hand, with pistols in their pockets, and with a document declaring to be a Constitution of the Republic of Hawaii. They gathered together at Iolani Palace to make a proclamation, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that proclamation. The underlying fact is that these group of individuals were a minority within Hawaii who had no legitimacy to have made this proclamation and then declared themselves the government of the Republic of Hawaii. But before getting into that aspect, let's just take a step back a few years. And what you will find in Hawaii before 1894 is a gathering of people who were called the missionary boys, or the boys of the missionary party. And they were called this because many of them were sons of missionaries or grandsons of missionaries. For example, one who was very instrumental in this group was Sanford Dole. Sanford Dole was a son of Daniel Dole, one of the early missionaries to Hawaii. Another was Lauren Thurston. His grandfather was one of the early Thurstons who had come as missionaries. So these missionary families came into Hawaii, and over a period of time, having established a good reputation among the native Hawaiians, their sons and daughters began to leave the pulpits of the church, entered into business, entered into politics, and became essentially greedy for power in Hawaii. They got into the practice of sugar production, wanting to sell sugar to the United States of America. But because Hawaii was seen as a foreign nation, a nation state recognized in the international community as an independent nation. And so whenever you try to sell sugar into the United States, we were treated as a foreign market or a foreign production area, that there were tariffs to be paid into the United States. And every cent of tariff that was paid was a cent off of the profit of the missionary boys. The missionary party was not very happy with this, and they tried to negotiate with the United States so that they could overcome the tariff. And how do you overcome the tariff? One person, as I was called to instruct at the Kamehameha School, a young man said, smuggle it in. And that was, of course, an accurate answer, but it wouldn't last very long. The other way was to get a treaty by which you would be able to overcome the tariff. So a treaty was signed with Hawaii and the United States, and the trade was essentially this. The United States wanted to have sovereignty over Pearl Harbor. King Kalakaua says, no, I will not give you sovereignty over any aspect of Hawaii, because should I do that, it would be an incursion upon the integrity of Hawaii as a sovereign nation. What he was willing to do was give to the United States the exclusive coaling and refueling rights over Pearl Harbor for 10 years. So in 1890 or 1887, a treaty of reciprocity was signed. Hawaii would allow the United States to use Pearl Harbor as a coaling and refueling station. And in return, the United States would drop its tariff for Hawaii or against Hawaii. So for a time, Hawaii's sugar planters were doing well. They were very happy with Kalakaua. But over a period of time, sugar growers in the United States began to agitate, saying, why are we allowing this free tariff, this cheap sugar to be coming in from this foreign country, and yet our sugar growers are having such a difficult time? So what the United States government did was, instead of raise a tariff because they were under an agreement by the treaty, with the reciprocity treaty with Hawaii, what they decided to do was increase payment or support by the government. I forget the term right now that it's called, but there's supplementation to the sugar growers to assist them in competing with foreign markets, which of course meant that it affected the Hawaii market. The boys of the missionary party was not happy with this change, and they were settled with the idea that the only way to gain a permanent market within the United States is by having Hawaii become part of the United States, so that Hawaii would not be seen as a foreign government. So what the missionary party did was begin the conspiracy with members of the U.S. military, as well as their own membership. The U.S. military wanted to take Hawaii as a jumping off point to reach further into the Pacific and into Asia, to open up Asia as the American or for American markets, or for American products. In Hawaii, of course, they wanted to become part of the United States so that they could sell their sugar to the United States. The missionary party then changed themselves into what they call the Committee for Public Safety, as if there was a threat to the public safety. The only threat to the public safety was that the missionary party wanted to grab Hawaii to cause a revolution or cause an overthrow, grab the nation of Hawaii and give it to the United States. Okay. So this Committee for Public Safety began talking with the representative of the United States, this what is called this Minister Plenipotentiary, Minister John Stevens, appointed by the President of the United States to represent the United States in Hawaii and to have all control over U.S. military. Minister Stevens met with the missionary party, who now call themselves a Committee for Public Safety, and they negotiated so that the American troops would land in Hawaii. On the 16th of January, 1893, 162 U.S. Blue Jackets landed, armed, ready for battle. They had the howitzer cannon with them, the Gatling gun with them, and they marched up and down the streets of Honolulu. Now, they didn't attack anyone, but they showed support for what was to happen the next day. On the 17th of January, 1893, the missionary party, now the Committee for Public Safety, began a march through the back streets of Honolulu on Queen Street and Merchant Street. They divided their 18 numbers so that they would not attract attention, walked to the back steps of Ali'iolani Hale, that building that stands in back of the Kamehameha statue. They gathered in back there, and then one person, Mr. Cooper, who had been in Hawaii for less than a year, an attorney, read a proclamation proclaiming that they now represent the provisional government. Provisional until terms could be signed with the United States to annex Hawaii to the United States. They appointed one of their members, Sanford Dole, who the day before that had been one of the justices of the Hawaii Supreme Court. He resigned. He now became president of the provisional government and declared that they were now the government of Hawaii. They approached Liliuokalani. Liliuokalani says, "Why should I surrender to you folks? You have no arms behind you. I have over 500 men in my military service." The response to Liliuokalani was this, that if you don't surrender to the provisional government, then you will face the wrath of the United States of America. Liliuokalani, having heard this, asked Minister Stevens if this was true, and Minister Stevens said that he was there and he would protect American lives and properties, including the people who claimed to be the provisional government. Liliuokalani then yielded her authority to the United States government until an investigation could be done and the life of the land restored to the Hawaiian people. Immediately, a treaty of annexation is signed between the the provisional government and the United States through President Harrison. They send the treaty to the United States. They attempt to pass the treaty through the U.S. Senate. The Senate does not adopt the treaty. Princess Kaiulani comes from England, goes to the United States, and tries to prevent the passage of the treaty. In the meantime, Harrison gets out of office. A new president comes into office, President Cleveland. Kaiulani appeals to President Cleveland to do the investigation. In the meantime, from Hawaii, Liliuokalani is able to send some of her emissaries to the United States, sneaking to the United States, pretending that they are businessmen, because the provisional government has prohibited any of the emissaries of the Queen to go to the United States. And they finally get to the United States, appealing to President Cleveland. Cleveland investigates and addresses the United States Congress on December 18, 1893. And in his address, he says very clearly that the events that occurred in Hawaii is not appropriate, and that he would not be allowing the Treaty of Annexation to be approved by the Senate as required by the United States Constitution. So as this is taking place, he also says that as President of the United States, I direct you Americans in Hawaii to restore the life of the land back to Queen Liliuokalani. Those Americans in Hawaii who have now declared themselves to be under the protection of the United States Minister Plenipotentiary, having formed a Committee for Public Safety, the Americans having landed to protect the lives and properties of the Americans, whose lives, the people who have now called themselves the provisional government, they now respond to Cleveland saying that the American presidents should stay out of the internal affairs of this independent nation. So now that the situation has changed, they have taken the other side, claiming that they are not American citizens, but are somehow now Hawaiian citizens. Okay. So they hold on to power. They are unable to get Cleveland to accept the treaty. And so what they need to do is to overcome the criticism that they are not a legitimate government. Sanford Dole devises the following plan, along with Lawrence Thurston. And they say that they shall have a constitutional convention in which they shall have 37 delegates to the convention, 19 of whom shall be appointed by Sanford Dole, the other 18 elected by the Hawaiian people. But before you can run for this 18 minority positions, you needed to sign a pledge, pledging your allegiance to the provisional government and disavowing any loyalty to Queen Liliuokalani. They forced the election through. They elected their 18. They formed the Constitutional Convention. Very few Native Hawaiians participated in this process. And then on the 4th of July, 1894, they came out with a document that declared that they are forming a new government called the Republic of Hawaii. So at about 8 o'clock in the morning on the 4th of July, 1894, Sanford Dole descends midway to the steps of Iolani Palace and draws out this Constitution of the Republic of Hawaii. And there he declares that Hawaii is now a Republic of Hawaii based on this Constitution. No vote is taken on this Constitution. By simple declaration, he declares that all of the government lands, all of the waters are now belonging to the Republic of Hawaii. All of the Hawaiian citizens of the Hawaiian nation are automatically declared to be citizens of the Republic of Hawaii. And Sanford Dole shall remain president of the Republic of Hawaii until 1900. No vote was taken, and in fact, the vast majority of the Hawaiian citizens at that time were kept off of Iolani Palace so that there would be no disturbances. As these events were occurring, of course, the people who were making this proclamation were very jittery. They were uncertain about what was going to come about. They didn't want protests or action taken against them. The American military had been there to continue to protect American lives and property. So on one hand, the native Hawaiians could not take any real action because Liliuokalani did not want to get into a fight with the United States. So on the 4th of July, 1894, while the Americans were celebrating in Hawaii their Independence Day under the principles of the consent of the governed, the Hawaiian people lost their nation simply by this declaration, using this date and stealing the independence of Hawaii. I'll be talking more about this matter in the next program. Thank you very much for joining me. Aloha Hawaii, a hui hou.